everybody. The story that I'm going to be reading you is called Secret in the Woods, and it is an adaptation of a book entitled The Tanglewood Secrets by Patricia St. Johns. I lay in bed holding my stomach. I had been sent to bed without any supper as a punishment for losing my temper and being rude to Aunt Margaret. It had been this way for 5 years now, ever since my brother Philip and I had come to live with Aunt Margaret while our parents went off to India as missionaries. I was 4 years old then, and my brother Philip was 6. Now we were 9 and 11. As I lay there feeling very sorry for myself, I heard my brother come up the steps to my bedroom. Soon his head peeked around my door. He put his finger up to his mouth and he whispered, "Here, Ruth, I saved you this." And he pulled a sticky bun out of his sock and handed it to me. "What else did you have for supper?" I asked. "We had sausages," Philip answered, "but they were too soft to put in my sock. They weren't very good anyhow. You didn't miss much." "Philip, what makes me say such unkind things to Aunt Margaret? I know I shouldn't. She has been good to us and is so kind to allow us to live here while Father and Mother are so far away." "Well, I don't know for sure, Ruth, but I do know it is only when you get cross that you lose your temper. Couldn't you try not to be cross? Then you would not lose your temper and say the awful things that you say." I just sighed and stuffed the sticky bun into my mouth. Philip held up his hand for me to listen as he cocked his head to one side. I stopped chewing and I listened. It was Aunt Margaret coming up the stairs. Philip jumped to his feet and scooted across the hall to his own room. He jumped into his bed with all his clothes on and pulled the covers up around his neck. "Good night, Philip," Aunt Margaret said as she tucked the covers in tightly around him. "Good night, Auntie," Philip replied. He was a little out of breath, but Aunt Margaret didn't seem to notice. Aunt Margaret stopped at my door. "Good night, Ruth," she said. I didn't answer. I pretended to be asleep, and so I made a good snoring noise, but Aunt Margaret wasn't fooled. "I'm sorry you're still mad," she said. Then she turned and walked down the hallway. I knew Aunt liked Philip best. He was good-looking and blue-eyed with light brown hair and a nice round face. Best of all, he never lost his temper. I was small and thin with hair that was almost always out of place, and I did lose my temper over and over again. Philip and I liked our bedrooms because we were at the very top of the house. We could see the green hills off in the distance. I like to think of the hills as a fairyland where I could go visiting when I grew up. "Good night, Phil," I called across the hall to my brother's room. "See you in the morning." Early the next morning, Philip slipped into my room. He wanted to look out my window to watch for the birds in the big plum tree. He was making a notebook about birds. I did the drawings. I painted the eggs, and Philip did the writing. "If only I had photographs of the birds and their eggs, I might get my book printed," sighed Philip. But the cheapest camera cost a great deal, and our money box only had $2.50 in it. "Ruth, we ought to go out in the woods today and look for different birds. We should go early and build a place where we could keep our things. It would be like our secret headquarters for bird watching," Philip said excitedly. "Let's dress quickly and get all our work done so we can get to the woods. We'll tell Aunt Margaret we're going to the woods, but for firewood, and we will bring a little bit back to prove it. But we won't tell her what we're really doing." After breakfast, Aunt Margaret asked, "So, what plans have you two made for today?" We're going to the woods to get firewood," Philip answered in his sweetest voice. "After we help you with the chores, of course." Hurriedly, I wiped the breakfast dishes, for I could be quick if I wanted to be. I grabbed the broom and I wildly swept the dirt around the room. I gathered a little pile of dirt and swept it under the rug, and then I ran out the kitchen door like I was a flash of lightning. Philip was outside chopping sticks. "This is going to take forever," he moaned. "Are you done already?" "We can't wait any longer, Philip," I said. "Here, nobody will know if you don't chop all the sticks," I said. I grabbed the sticks that hadn't been chopped, threw them in a ditch, and covered them with leaves. Then we dashed off. I ran ahead of Philip. It was sheer joy just to be alive on such a beautiful day. I stopped to watch the lambs while waiting for Philip to catch up with me. Suddenly, one of the lambs left the flock and came to me. He licked me and he was really friendly. Then the old shepherd came and said, "That's a wee little one, always into mischief." When the lamb heard the voice of the shepherd, he ran to him quickly. The shepherd picked him up tenderly, saying, "He knows my voice all right." "Come on, Ruth," Philip called impatiently. "We're wasting time." Reaching the woods, Philip found the perfect spot for our headquarters, and all day we worked on it. I collected branches, and Philip made them into a fort. We left a little opening through which we could barely squeeze. Each morning we hurried through our chores, and then we ran off to the woods. Philip was finding many new birds to study, and I was eagerly watching the eggs, waiting for the baby birds to hatch. Oh, what fun it was to have a secret hideout. One morning, Aunt Margaret made me stay home and help with the washing. I was angry, and so I threw all the clean clothes in the mud, and Aunt Margaret had to wash them again. Then I wasn't allowed to go to the woods for a whole week because I had lost my temper. I went outside to wait for Philip to come home. He would feel bad because I had been naughty again. "I want to be good," I whispered. "I don't want to lose my temper or be selfish. Oh, why can't I just be good?" But try as hard as I would, I just couldn't be good. How trying I must have been to Aunt Margaret. One day, after a particularly hard day, Aunt Margaret could stand no more of my naughtiness. I had behaved badly in front of one of her friends. When she told me that I was to say sorry and apologize, I refused. "I'm not sorry one bit. You're a mean old lady," I cried as I stamped my muddy feet. Glaring at the friend, I ran quickly out of the room. Aunt Margaret came after me as though she were very, very tired. She stood beside me. "Ruth," she said slowly, "I'm not going to punish you because it doesn't seem to help. But I've been thinking, I don't seem to be able to bring you up the way I should. I'm going to send you away to boarding school." She turned away from me, and I felt like my whole world was falling apart. "I won't go," I said. "I wasn't asking," Aunt Margaret replied. "Well, fine," I said in a shaky voice, "then I'll run away and I'll never come back." And with that, I ran out the door and down the road. Aunt Margaret didn't pay that much attention because I often ran off like this in a fit of temper. Only this time, I meant it. I ran, and I wasn't going back. It didn't matter where I went as long as I got away. "You're going off to boarding school. You're going off to boarding school." I kept repeating the horrible words to myself. It was going to be terrible. It would be like going to jail. I was sure of it. Oh, how I was going to miss Philip. And that brings us to the end of Chapter 1 of Secrets in the Woods. Please join us again next week as we continue with Chapter 2 and we find out what happens to all of the characters in our story.